Picture this: June 4th, 1942. The Kido Butai, the most powerful carrier fleet on the planet, is slicing through the Pacific toward a tiny atoll called Midway. They're the undisputed masters of the ocean, a force that hasn't tasted defeat since its stunning blow against Pearl Harbor. On board are the veteran pilots and crews who have crushed every opponent in their path. Their objective? Brutally simple: lure the last remnants of the American Pacific Fleet into one final decisive battle and annihilate them. On paper, the plan conceived by Admiral Yamamoto is flawless. The Americans are outnumbered, outgunned, and by all accounts, sailing straight into a perfectly laid trap. There's just one problem the Japanese High Command doesn't know about. Their secret codes have been broken. The ambush is about to be turned on them. In a chaotic, desperate attack lasting just 5 minutes, American pilots will achieve the impossible and change the course of the Second World War. These are the 5 minutes that doomed Japan's empire. In the 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Empire of Japan seemed absolutely unstoppable. Its forces swept across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, conquering everything from the Philippines to the Dutch East Indies. The Japanese military was dominant, its strategy bold, and its ambition boundless. But one event would shatter that sense of invincibility: the Doolittle Raid. On April 18, 1942, American B-25 bombers suddenly appeared over Tokyo, having launched from the deck of the USS Hornet. Militarily, the raid did very little damage, but its psychological impact on Japan's leaders was immense. It was a profound embarrassment, proving the homeland was vulnerable. Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of Japan's naval strategy, became obsessed with the idea that the American aircraft carriers, the one threat his forces missed at Pearl Harbor, had to be destroyed. His plan was a masterpiece of complexity and daring. He would use the invasion of Midway Atoll, a vital American outpost, as bait. Yamamoto was certain the US Navy couldn't afford to lose Midway and would send its carriers to defend it right into his trap. A massive Japanese fleet centered on 4 veteran carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, would be lying in wait to obliterate the American fleet. To split American attention, a diversionary attack would also hit the Aleutian Islands off Alaska. It was a plan built on overwhelming force and the assumption of total surprise. Except, there was no surprise. In a basement in Pearl Harbor, a team of brilliant, overworked American cryptanalysts at Station Hypo, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, had done the impossible. They had cracked Japan's main naval code, JN-25. For weeks, they pieced together intercepted messages, slowly revealing the shape of Yamamoto's grand plan. They suspected the target was a location codenamed AF, but Washington wasn't convinced. To prove it, Rochefort cooked up a brilliant little trick. He had the garrison at Midway broadcast an uncoded message saying their water distillation plant had failed. Days later, a deciphered Japanese message noted that AF was short on fresh water. The trap was exposed. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the US Pacific Fleet, now knew where and when the attack was coming. Armed with this priceless intelligence, he prepared his own ambush. He only had 3 carriers: Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown against Japan's 4. But he had the element of surprise. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The battle began on the morning of June 4, 1942. At 4:30 a.m., the first wave of 108 Japanese aircraft launched from the Kido Butai to strike Midway. The attack did some damage to the American base, but critically, it failed to knock out its airfield. As the Japanese planes flew back, a series of disjointed and tragically heroic American attacks began. Torpedo bombers from Midway and the American carriers flew straight into a wall of anti-aircraft fire and swarms of Japanese Zero fighters. These were slow, obsolete planes, and they were utterly slaughtered. Out of 41 torpedo bombers that attacked, only 6 came back, and not a single one scored a hit. But their sacrifice wasn't entirely in vain. These doomed attacks pulled the Japanese fighter patrols down to sea level, leaving the skies above the fleet wide open. And that sacrifice set the stage for the battle's most critical decision. The pressure now fell squarely on one man, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the Japanese carriers. His first strike on Midway reported that a second attack was needed. Following doctrine, Nagumo had ordered his reserve planes, which were armed with torpedoes for ships, to be rearmed with bombs for another strike on the island. It was a slow, tedious process. Then, at 7:28 a.m., a scout plane sent a shocking report. An American fleet, including what looked like a carrier, had been spotted. Suddenly, Nagumo was caught in a disastrous dilemma. His planes from the first strike were running on fumes and needed to land right away. His hangar decks were a chaotic mess of bombs, torpedoes, and fuel lines as crews scrambled to switch the armament on his reserve planes back to torpedoes. He had two terrible options: launch a hasty, disorganized attack on the American carrier with what he had ready, or recover his first wave, properly rearm his entire force for a coordinated blow, and risk getting hit first. Nagumo, sticking to the rigid Japanese doctrine that favored a single overwhelming blow, chose to wait. It was a fatal delay. His four carriers were now at their most vulnerable. Decks crowded with planes, hangars packed with unsecured bombs and fuel. As Nagumo's crews worked frantically, the sky above the Japanese fleet was empty. The American torpedo attacks had been annihilated, and for a moment it must have seemed like the danger had passed. High above, though, something incredible was happening. Two squadrons of SPD Dauntless dive bombers from the USS Enterprise, led by Wade McCluskey, were getting dangerously low on fuel. They'd flown to where the Japanese fleet was supposed to be and found nothing but empty ocean. Instead of turning back, McCluskey made an unbelievably risky decision: continue the search. Acting on pure instinct, he decided to follow the wake of a lone Japanese destroyer, the Arashi, which was racing to rejoin the fleet. It was a decision that would change history. Just after 10:20 a.m., McCluskey ace bombers broke through the clouds and saw it. The entire Kido Butai spread out below them. Then, by an unbelievable stroke of luck, dive bombers from the USS Yorktown, led by Maxwell Leslie, arrived at the exact same moment from a different direction. The Japanese fighter patrol was still down low, finishing off the last of the torpedo planes. The carriers were completely defenseless. What happened next was 5 minutes of pure, concentrated destruction. McCluskey's pilots from the Enterprise pushed their planes into a screaming dive. The first bomb smashed into the carrier Kaga. One hit a gasoline truck, engulfing the bridge in a fireball, while others tore through the flight deck and ignited the fully fueled and armed planes below. In moments, the Kaga was a raging inferno. At the same time, Lieutenant Richard Best saw too many of his comrades diving on the Kaga. He broke off with his two wingmen and aimed for Nagumo's flagship, the Akagi. A single 1,000-pound bomb hit the deck and exploded in the hangar, setting off a catastrophic chain reaction. Meanwhile, the Yorktown's bombers fell upon the Soryu, planting 3 bombs that turned the carrier into a blazing wreck. Between 10:22 and 10:27 a.m., just 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's finest aircraft carriers were turned into floating pyres. The heart of the Japanese Navy was ripped out. The veteran air crews who had dominated the Pacific were gone. In a blink, the balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted for good. Intelligence, gambles, and sheer heroism all collided in those 5 minutes. The split-second decisions made in the heat of battle really can change the world. If you love stories about the pivotal moments that shaped our history, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next video. The Japanese fleet was mortally wounded, but it wasn't going down without a fight. The last remaining carrier, Hiryu, launched a swift and valiant counterattack, finding the American carrier, Yorktown, and hitting it with bombs and torpedoes. But it was a final desperate act. Later that afternoon, American scout planes found the Hiryu, and dive bombers from the Enterprise sealed its fate, leaving it a burning hulk. Miles away with the main battleship force, unable to do anything, Admiral Yamamoto was forced to order a general retreat. The battle was over. The losses were devastatingly one-sided. Japan lost all 4 of its heavy carriers, a heavy cruiser, over 250 aircraft and more than 3,000 men, including most of their irreplaceable battle-hardened pilots. The United States lost 1 carrier, the Yorktown, which finally sank after being hit by a Japanese submarine, 1 destroyer, and around 150 planes. The Battle of Midway was the undisputed turning point of the Pacific War. In a single morning, Japan's offensive power was shattered. This strategic initiative passed to the United States, which would now begin its long, bloody, island-hopping campaign toward Japan. The once invincible Japanese empire was now on a permanent defensive, a downward spiral from which it would never recover. It was all decided in 5 chaotic minutes when a handful of courageous pilots over the Pacific doomed an empire and changed the world forever.